This video is sponsored by War Thunder. Hey guys, what's up? MadSeason here, back with another video for you. So something quite interesting is happening within the world of MMOs, and I'm kind of caught in the middle of it actually. So I wanted to make a video talking about it for you here. Basically, if you don't know what's going on recently, there's been kind of a migration going on, if you will, from World of Warcraft to old school RuneScape. Some people are happy, some are neutral, a lot are quite angry, as MMO players tend to be, and I kind of wanted to analyze this situation here because it is quite interesting, I think. So, long story short, in October of last year, I decided to dip my toes into the wonderful world of Gielinor. There really wasn't much going on with World of Warcraft during the time that I was interested in personally, and inspired by another channel, Jimmy, who came over to WoW as a new player, I decided to sort of match that and do the same with OSRS, and it's been really fun. And more recently, within the past month or so, there's actually been a bunch of WoW channels that are checking it out as well, and it's kind of blown up at this point, and there's this huge wave of optimism with OSRS, and this huge wave of pessimism with World of Warcraft, because at least at the moment, Blizzard is kind of struggling with what to do with Classic. But do you know what developer isn't struggling? Are you tired of waiting for World War III to officially kick off so we can be sent to our glorious nuclear Armageddon? Well, wait no longer. Bring war to your depressing bedroom with the free-to-play War Thunder, Commander MadSeason's favorite game on the Citadel. PC, PlayStation, Xbox, mobile, tanks, planes, helicopters, ships. Oh my. With over 2,500 options from 10 major nations from all the timelines to blow shit up. Or get yourself blown up. With the X-ray feature, which shows you to the very last detail just why you're bad at video games. Whether it be its sound effects or graphics. With over 70 million players engaging in massive PvP battles, you think you want to play, and you do. And between the engines, fuel tanks, and weapons, each part of these machines, including the crew members who operate them, are susceptible to damage and are fully customizable, such as this historically accurate anime decal. All that's needed is you, keyboard, a couple of energy drinks, and an abundance of free time on a Friday night. Click my links in the pinned comment or description if you're a new or returning player who hasn't played for 6 months on PC and console. You'll get the limited time massive bonus pack, which includes the Eagle of Valor exclusive vehicle decoration, 100,000 silver lions, and 7 days of premium. Anyways, memes aside, as you would expect, things have gotten pretty toxic and tribalistic, as MMOs tend to unfortunately be. And I just want to say I would like to avoid that. I personally think it's unproductive. I might feel like that at moments in this video because that just kind of naturally happens when you compare two things next to each other and two developers next to each other. But hopefully that's not the vibe the video gives off. I think both games are cool in their own right. The community opinion is very much leaning one way right now, but it's far from beyond redemption, as I'll explain. So, a lot of people are kind of taking this as WoW bad. Primarily Classic is bad because OSRS is, of course, also a Classic recreation, so they kind of draw the similar audience, and there's just no interest in World of Warcraft Classic anymore, which is a half-truth. I'm not sure about retail. I haven't really kept up to date, aside from this abomination you're staring at. My brand! Small indie game dev, by the way. This is the kind of quality content that record-breaking microtransaction profits gets you, I guess, so shoutouts to that. But as far as Classic is concerned, there's actually a massive interest in it. It's just that there's not much interest right now due to how Blizzard has sort of structured it, and for this there are definitely a few reasons, starting with number one here, and that's meaningful progression. And what I mean by that is the time that you put into the game isn't made to be irrelevant within a year, or heck, even a few months later. You may have seen this. There's actually been a lot of people who have been talking about this. It's kind of becoming a thing as the MMORPG genre evolves. Heck, even the latest ad from OSRS outright mentions it.
Tired of chasing gear that'll be worthless next patch. In old school RuneScape, your progress actually matters. No resets, no seasons, no FOMO. Just you and your grind.
So this is what's called horizontal versus vertical progression. If you don't know, vertical progression is essentially character progression such that when new content is released, it replaces old content or otherwise makes it irrelevant or far less relevant in some way. This is how Modern WoW has done it for a very long time. At first it was with new expansion releases. You know, BC comes out and vanilla gear is mostly useless by the time you reach level 70. But now it's actually done by patch. Like when patch 10.1 releases, 10.0 content is replaced within a few days, and you never go back again to the raid content of 10.0. And when 10.2 releases, the same is true for 10.1 and so on and so forth. And you may be asking, okay, why would they do that? I definitely see the appeal in a fresh start, but every 4 or 5 months or so, or whenever they release patches these days, kind of seems to be a bit much, especially in a genre of game which is centered around character progression. Now me, I personally have a little theory that this is done in order to sell more WoW tokens, since progression is now essentially resetting every patch as opposed to every expansion, and when progression resets, WoW tokens sell because people are buying new BOEs, they're buying all of their new enchants and, you know, tertiary trade skill stuff to catch up to the new content. But I digress. That's its own whole cringe 1-hour rant that I already did many years ago. So I'm going to save that for another video maybe. Getting back on subject here, vertical progression versus horizontal. Now, horizontal, on the other hand, avoids this self-cannibalization, and the game only grows in impactful things to do, while at the same time avoiding making existing systems and features or places or the time spent invested into them irrelevant. Just recently they released some more content. There's a new area in the game, and by releasing this area, it doesn't make anywhere else in the world irrelevant. The entire world of Gielinor and all the things to do in it are still valuable and they still matter. In fact, in some cases they matter more. Soon they'll be releasing a new skill called Sailing, and by releasing this, not only does it not make the other skills like magic, hunting, herblore, or any of the other ones irrelevant, it in fact can make them more relevant due to the way that skills interact with each other in this game. And I know what a lot of people are going to say, it's apples and oranges. The games are too different to be compared to one another. But even vanilla World of Warcraft, as theme park as it is, has this perfect example. When the Blackwing Lair comes out, you still want to do the Molten Core. In fact, many guilds are still doing the Molten Core even when the final raid, Next Rammus, is out, because there are a few key items in there that are still really good, even at that raid tier. So, although I would say it isn't as much as a game like OSRS, which is obviously much more sandbox, these things, combined with the loot being so diverse in vanilla, creates this sort of horizontal progression aspect where even early raid tiers are relevant enough to where guilds still run them when the new raids come out. In fact, it's one of the things that makes vanilla so unique, because from this point onward is when they started moving more towards this vertical style of progression. Of course, with the first expansion, the Burning Crusade raising the level cap like I mentioned and erasing 99% of the gear by the time you reach Nagrand. So, coming back to OSRs for a moment, and this is one of its greatest strengths, the entire way that it's been crafted provides security and longevity, where if you feel burnt out, or if you just have real life stuff happen, which happens to all of us, obviously, by the time you come back, you don't have what is essentially at this irrelevant dead character to regrind. You have retained your progress, and if you don't believe me on that, let's just look at the numbers. Numbers don't lie. So OSRS officially relaunched in 2013, so it has a 6-year head start before Classic, which is important to note, but similar to Classic WoW, it was the original old school version of the game. Jagex, much like Blizzard, kind of went off the rails with the game, from what I understand, which is now referred to as RuneScape 3. It gained this whole new identity, in a large way motivated to try to appeal to WoW players, ironically enough, and although I haven't played it personally, I hear nothing but terrible things about it. It supposedly has one of the most effed up and predatory microtransaction systems even by today's standards. And on that note, I also hope that this video doesn't come off as me fanboying Jagex and shitting on Blizzard. Although I'm definitely more happy with Jagex right now, the side I'm on is the player side. I think what's happened with Blizzard over the course of the past decade is a perfect example of what loyalty to a developer gets you. In my opinion, the only side you should be loyal to is you, the player, because by doing that, you're forcing these developers to compete against each other for your dollar. But we'll get into that later. I'm getting ahead of myself. But anyways, as you can see, when OSRS first launched, it saw this big surge of popularity, much like Classic WoW 2019. And like Classic WoW, things slowly tapered off because it's an MMO. There's nothing abnormal or anything the developers have done wrong at this point. It's just how MMOs work. There's this huge surge of popularity and then a drop off. This is common, especially if there's this foreseeable finish line in the future, because guess what? Finish lines erase security. The entire genre from its inception is based off of the fact that it never ends. Day one, that's what MMOs were all about. If you run out of things to do, the developers add more things to do in order to keep you subscribed. Failing that, the game loses one of its greatest strengths, and it'll just retain this very baseline amount of really super hardcore dedicated players who just really love the world so much that they are content with it never changing. But as great as all that is, the large majority of that initial surge will quote-unquote complete the game, as much as you can complete an MMO, and then move on to another one that are actually offering new and exciting things. And I mention this, and it's really, really important because this is where these two developers diverge and has led us to the situation today. So what exactly is this split? Well, whereas Blizzard went down the route of re-releasing expansions, which carried a certain amount of vanilla classic players with them, because this is where the new content lies as they stopped updating vanilla. They had classic era servers, but they just kept it at the final 1.12 patch, which kept a baseline amount of players, like I said, but that's it. But over on the OSRS side of things, something interesting started to happen. They had stayed with the original game in this original world, but essentially started doing OSRS Plus, what classic players have been fiending for a very long time if you're at all involved with the community. So for OSRS, as you can imagine, this was the original game in the original world, with changes and updates added in the spirit of this original game. Changes that were added in a non-cannibalistic way that didn't destroy time investment and character progression, and complete with polls voted on by the players to make sure that it stays on track, and they also have some sort of say in it. And as you can see, as the numbers show, after this initial surge, OSRS wasn't really that popular. It was only after they started adding these new features and areas and quests true to this original flavor is when something interesting started to happen. The game, instead of declining, although very slowly, started to grow and grow like Rosie O'Donnell's penis, until today, where everyone's now realized, oh shit, this game's pretty damn good. And most importantly, there's no end in sight. Huge content like new areas and bosses and skills, to small fixes and optimizations. The game gets updated every 2 weeks, if you can believe that. New areas, activities, enemies, items, whatever. And over the course of the past 12 years, it's now in a position where it's setting new records every day, and it's really paying dividends. So we contrast this with World of Warcraft, which mystifyingly has gone down the same path of expansions, but we'll save that for later. For now, let's focus more on vanilla, since I think that's really more comparable here. As you know, they've relied primarily on these temporary seasons. There was the Season of Mastery, which had some endgame raid balance changes, and their most recent Discovery, which had much more impactful stuff like class changes, tons of new stuff, profession items, rebalancing, new low-level raids and whatnot, which we'll talk about. Some of it within the realm of what people commonly request of Classic Plus, but ultimately quite a lot of it outside of it, unless I don't know, you guys have seen people really want rogue tanks and no Maragon raids in their version of Classic Plus, which I personally have not seen, but it is what it is, I guess. But even still, whatever the case is, the issue is the same. They eventually end. You can't put in a couple months of time and then, with any confidence, come back a year later and continue where you left off at the same level. And not only that, but if any substantial amount of time has passed, if you have the knowledge that the season is going to end, why would you start midway through? This was made especially worse with how closed-mouthed they were with when their season was going to end. Near the end, they were actually putting out Classic Plus-esque content like a Scarlet Monastery raid and an Ashbringer questline, but why would you start and play it if, for all that you know, it could end in 3 months, 2 months, 1 month? They have created zero security that your investment and progression will retain value in a genre of game that's centered around time investment and character progression. Perfect example here, Season of Discovery, which after Phase 1 maintained fairly low numbers, I would say. That is until the very day that they announced that it was ending, and that's when everyone quit. Because, of course, it's common sense. Why would you play? Why invest so much time into this time-consuming genre centered around character progression when you know you will not retain any of this progression? Knowing that an MMO will end or your time spent will be made to be irrelevant is one of the most demotivating things that a player can experience. And this all may seem obvious to you, in which case the question then becomes, well, why has Blizzard structured their games in this way? Well, yeah, I don't know. Don't look at me, I'm asking the same question here. I'm actually very curious about that. In fact, Discovery was especially egregious with this due to its phase system and the way they capped off levels. At first it was level 20, and then 30, and then 40, with each new phase essentially dismantling the work and time invested in the previous phase, kind of following this retail structure of when new patches releases, everything you did in the previous patch is replaced within a few days. And, you know, hindsight is 2020 for sure, but, I mean, once again, as you could see by the drop-off, huge wave of popularity in Phase 1, followed by a pretty sharp decline. And in fact, if you ask people who played Discovery, it's pretty common for them to say, well, Phase 1 was really awesome, but after that it was kind of lame. So, you know, just thinking about it here, it's really no wonder why the situation is as it is right now. Having this genre of game defined by its longevity and erasing people's time investment and work is one of the most mystifying things about this whole situation. Not only are Blizzard destroying people's progression on a macro level, with the seasons themselves ending, they're also doing it on a micro level, in between these different phasing systems. And again, there's value in a fresh start, but how much is too much? And I think clearly, as we could tell by the situation currently going on, this is too much. The simple fact of the matter is that OSRS has been designed to grow, and World of Warcraft, nearly every version of the game, has been designed to surge and then burn out immediately, and you now see the former reaping the rewards of that long-term design, as it's now been over a decade of these faithful, non-cannibalistic content added to the game. Even if you played OSRS at its launch in 2013, played it for a few months or a year, haven't touched it since, maybe you got 99 mining, that skill is just as relevant today as it was back then. In fact, probably more so, because they've added more content and activities relating to the skill, and you can just jump in and enjoy those. So this is the split. When Blizzard had the opportunity to do the exact same thing, they instead chose to throw their game and their players' time investment into a recycler, and despite how much time you put into it, you're still where you left off, square one, and any time you put into Mastery or Discovery has resulted in only memories, while the 2019 version follows the same path that led to its very creation. So let's talk about this. I just fail to get it, maybe? My mind is kind of blown with this whole situation. It's like if Jagex, instead of doing what they're doing with OSRS, they instead re-released it and then followed through with the changes that eventually turned it into RuneScape 3, thereby repeating the same mistakes and setting players down the very same path that created the desire for old school RuneScape to begin with. It sounds insane. In fact, it literally is the definition of insanity, repeating the same thing and expecting different results, but that's what Blizzard is doing. I shit you not, we're almost at the point where they're about to re-release the Warlords of Mother Effing Draenor, okay? It's like, what's the point? The most entertainment that expansion brought was sitting half AFK in your garrison, arguing about politics and trade chat. This is one of the main driving forces of this migration that's happening right now. It's no secret. Everyone's talking about it. This isn't a groundbreaking video. OSRS is making ads based off of it. World of Warcraft and OSRS are two very different games, and you can't directly compare them together. That's very true. One is a sandbox, the other is a theme park, but if you say that, they can at the very least learn from one another. My reply is that, well, you'd make a very great Blizzard developer because it's an incredibly obtuse and unproductive way of looking at things. In any creative body, you have to have the ability to put your ego aside and say, oh, you know what, this competitor did this thing really well. I'm going to retain my identity, but I'm also going to learn from it to improve the product that I am putting out. And the knowledge that Blizzard can glean from this to improve their game for you is building off of this strong base in a non-cannibalistic way and reappreciating this core fundamental appeal that the MMO genre has had day one, security and longevity, and to not disrespect the player's time by setting them back to square one every few months. It isn't some grand revelation. In fact, it's always been the elephant in the room with vanilla specifically. Day one, it was that, okay, what happens after Naxxramas? The issue with re-releases within the MMO genre is that, of course, the second time around, the finish line is common knowledge. In 2004, most people didn't even know what an expansion was, let alone its implications. Knowing this finish line limits its potential severely, and this is the answer that's staring them right in the face. Keep the original game, add content in line in its original spirit, go on this alternative pathway from the Outland, stay in the original 2 continents, and create new content and memories with your community as your ally and partner, and use them to help guide you, because chances are they probably know the game more than you. A handful of a few dozen developers do not know more than the hundreds of thousands of community of players who have played the game for the past 20 years. But whatever the case is, relying on these temporary servers has caused vanilla to fall far short of its actual potential. And even saying that, OSRS also does have these temporary seasons, but they're integrated into the main game. They're called leagues. They launch every now and then, and they have accelerated progression similar to classic seasons, but instead of just solely being their own thing that ends, by participating in them, you earn a currency that you can spend in the main game to unlock cosmetic rewards as kind of a show of your participation for that league. The main game doesn't end when they're finished, and they're used to shake up the experience and at the same time progress the main game in various ways. Because from what I understand, they also use them as a testing ground, and if there's an element that the players really liked in a particular league, they implement it into the mainline OSRS after conferring once again with the player base. And in the cases of features that the players didn't like, oh well, it's just a side league, and it's not the only thing to play, and there's always still new, more grounded stuff being developed every day. So again, another feature that, in my opinion, has been far more thought out and well done. Who knows, they may have even gotten the idea from Blizzard, and they were able to put their ego aside, learn from it, do better, and still retain their original identity and leverage ideas from your competitor without ripping them off to make your game better and your community happier. So between the way that the game itself is constructed and with it using seasons as a supplement, as opposed to relying on them exclusively like World of Warcraft is doing right now, Jagex is offering something that Blizzard isn't, and it's a large reason why you see this exodus. Maybe they thought that Pandaria Classic would fill the gap, but it isn't, because it's not vanilla. In fact, this very same expansion is directly one of the ones that made people yearn for vanilla, because it was so out there and against the identity of what World of Warcraft is. There are people who play Warcraft and they want orcs, violence, and heavy metal, not mystical adventures in Pandaland. And it was Pandaria that really kind of made them realize, like, okay, wow, this isn't the game that I fell in love with. I want to play private servers and go back to the original version. The gap in design and feel between Mists of Pandaria and vanilla is just too large for vanilla players to be satisfied, as evidenced with this Exodus. I shit you not, there are streamers right now who are refusing paid sponsorships to play Pandaria and are instead playing OSRS.
And I want to tell you that I declined a $5,000 deal to play Mists of Pandaria to fucking play this game, so put some respect on my name, man! I actually enjoyed this game. I rejected big money to play this, okay?
That's right. They literally can't pay people to play their game. Wow. Wow. Oh god. What a state of affairs. Again, it's just this fundamental misunderstanding of what the player base wants. Intentionally or otherwise, they've actually designed these dead periods lasting several months at a time. People won't play your game if there's no game to play. It's quite simple, actually. So, reason number 2 kind of ties in with 1, is why you're seeing this migration, is that there's just really not a lot going on with classic World of Warcraft right now due to the way that it's structured, at least within the vanilla or the vanilla-esque realm. But, you know, I'll tell you right now, and I know there's a lot of apathy surrounding Blizzard, and you're going to see it in the comments for sure, but I'm telling you, Blizzard announces an actual Classic Plus, there will be massive hype. There will be massive interest because it's there. It's sort of like potential energy versus kinetic. OSRS has more kinetic right now because of the way that they formatted their game, whereas World of Warcraft is running low because their season recently ended and Pandaria doesn't appeal to vanilla players enough, but they do have this huge swell of potential energy just sitting right there. It's just that they haven't really been able to tune into it fully for the past 5 years. WoW is actually kind of unique because it has this rather large private server scene that sort of serves as this canary in the coal mine situation, except instead of toxic fumes, they indicate interest. Maybe a bad analogy, I don't know. But getting to the point, some may remember that one of the reasons why Blizzard finally even implemented Classic to begin with was because of private servers. They didn't have this revelation where they actually understood their player base. They saw that one private server in particular, Nostalrius, had grown to unprecedented levels, so much so that they saw it as a threat to their own player base and they sent their legal team to get it shut down, but not before flying the Nostalrius developers out to California to have a chat with them, presumably about making Classic an official thing after years of saying no, in a very condescending way, by the way. And the reason why I'm mentioning this is that if you haven't heard what's going on right now with private servers, it's another canary in the coal mine situation. There's 2 servers in particular, Turtle WoW and Project Epoch, are essentially what players have been asking for years, Classic Plus, and it's what I just described. The base game, vanilla, they've added features and areas that build off of that, sort of like an alternative timeline where instead of going through the Dark Portal in 2007, you stay in Azeroth, and they release unfinished zones such as Mount Hyjal, Uldum, unreleased battlegrounds such as Ashara Crater, and, you know, other similar content that was planned for the original game by the original developers and made in the same feel as the original game. In other words, exactly what old school RuneScape has done. So, I know I'm repeating myself a lot, but Blizzard says all the time they want feedback and they listen to the players, which, by the way, brings us to reason number 3 here, and that's disconnect. This also isn't a secret. Blizzard has to be one of the most disconnected developers in relation to their player base. Recently, I made a video analyzing a survey about a potential possible Classic Plus. And do you know what the comments were in that video? Go play the new private server. And the reason for that is on the very same survey, there's a question if they should include fucking Pokemon pet battles in this supposed version. Maybe the best way to explain it is from personal experience. And I want to preface this by saying I'm not perfect. I've been wrong plenty of times, and I'll be wrong plenty more, but I've been playing World of Warcraft in some capacity for about 20 years now, except when I nerd raged and quit for 2 years. I've been making videos about it for 10. I have over 600 of them, and in those 600 videos and all of the feedback in them, I have not seen one single identifiable change based off of my feedback. I shit you not, within 3 OSRS videos, Jagex were quoting my channel specifically in changes made to improve their new user experience of their game. They have mods that are in direct one-on-one conversation with the players, and again, they even have this polling system where they introduce ideas and the community votes on them. You don't really get how uncommunicative a developer is until you actually encounter one that is communicative. I'm not sure what the issue is. People are going to make fun of me for this, but I do think that they want to. Maybe they just don't know how. Perhaps there's an element that Blizzard is kind of the punching bag of the video game development sphere right now, so maybe it's too toxic for them. But, you know, whatever the case is, if you're putting pet battles on a Classic Plus survey, you're in no way, shape, or form in touch with your audience at all. And if you're not in touch, you can't effectively deliver what they want. And you start giving them things like infinitely repeatable quests that take you from level 1 to 50 in a single corner of the world while earning 1,000 gold in the process. If you happen to watch their official videos relating to Discovery, you'd know that the whole premise of SOD was kind of born out of the idea that they have zero idea of what their community wants. They said many times that everything's a wild experiment to see what people want. On one hand, it's good because this is an attempt to get feedback, but on the other hand, you don't really need to experiment to know that incursions are about the exact opposite of what vanilla World of Warcraft is. In a lot of ways, again, it just kind of felt like them just sort of doing their own thing. Classic Plus has been talked about for many years. There's almost an infinite amount of wealth of information out there, and considering this, it's quite concerning to a lot of people that on a survey they see retail graphics, pet battles, and vanilla garrisons. So, reason number 3 is disconnect. What I would like to personally see are, like Jagex, for it to be this team-based experience that OSRS has been principled off of. But anyways, that's about all I have to say. Like I said, it's quite an interesting situation. We all obviously know that the games are very different, but that doesn't mean that there aren't lessons to be learned here, or there isn't any room for improvement. I do think that both are great in their own right, or they at least have the potential to be. I think vanilla is in kind of an awkward place right now, but like I said many times, it does have huge potential, and if they do go down the route that everybody has been clamoring for, I'll guarantee you that there'll be massive excitement because there is huge interest in it. As for me, I do appreciate both of them. I'm very much hooked on OSRS right now, and I do have an interest in the idea of a Classic Plus. I hope that both of these games find their stride and thrive, because the better both of them are, the more they have to compete with one another, which means it's a better experience for us as players. Thank you once again to the sponsor of this video, War Thunder. Play free today on PC, PlayStation, Xbox, or mobile, and use my links in the pinned comment or description, especially for those who play on PC or console and are a new or returning player from 6 months, for a massive bonus pack with premium vehicles and more, available for a limited time. But that's about it. Let me know what you think. Like the video if you liked it, because I'll see you in the next one. Peace.
Farewell for now, mortals. We hope you enjoyed today's video. See you again soon.